We're going to cover the top 6 mobility exercises that you can use to improve your performance in football, and we're going to start right now. What's up, everybody? It's Dane Miller from GarageStrength.com, and if this is your first time to the channel and you're interested in becoming a better athlete, you want to get more explosive, you want to become stronger, and you want to transfer that weight room strength over to the field, make sure that you like, you subscribe, and you ring that notification bell so we can help you become a champion. So training for football can be extremely difficult. It can be challenging. Your body can take a beating on and off the field, and you've got to know what elements you have to focus on when you're training in the weight room. And so we know, based off of past videos, that you've got to have a bit of absolute strength. You've got to have that technical coordination. So that means doing Olympic lifts, doing the cleans, doing snatches, or variations of these different movements. You've got to have really good reactive strength. You need to be strong from a unilateral position and from a bilateral position. And so all of these different key elements that we have to train in the weight room can lead to a lot of stress on the body. If we couple that with all of the stress that football players get on the field, it can become overwhelming to a point if it's not periodized and programmed effectively. So we have to think about what actually is mobility for football. It means that you've got to have a decent amount of passive flexibility, but when you have that passive flexibility, you have to have stability in that joint. So if you have a nice range of motion that can fire and recruit motor units when you're in those deeper ranges of motion, that is what mobility is all about. So now we can dive deeper into those top 6 exercises that are going to help you become a more mobile football player. So going right into that number 6 exercise, we've got to think about our hips. We've got to think about what our hips need to do. And that's going to lead us to that number 6 exercise, which is the 90-90 hip rotation with a squat. And so this is going to be something that I believe all football players should do every single day before training, every single day before they get out onto the field. It's going to really help the rotational aspect of your hips. It's also going to help open up and loosen up your glutes and your lower back. When you do the 90-90 hip drill, you're going to feel it right away, okay? And it's relatively easy to do. Somebody who's a little stiff, you might have to come up with a little bit of alterations. If you feel this right away and you do this on a regular basis, your depth in your squats, your depth in your stance, your ability to cut more effectively because you can get a little bit lower when you're cutting will be noticed immediately. This is something that you will see literally within 4 or 5 days of doing this, and you're going to see that improvement over time. And this can even lead to a little bit of alleviation of lower back pain. This could also lead to, if somebody has a tight groin or anything along those lines, this exercise can potentially help alleviate any of those groin pains that you might have. So I recommend doing those 90-90 rotations with a little bit of a squat to help open up the glutes. Do this every single day. You can do 2 sets of 7 to each side, and then you can hold that squat position when you're leaning forward for about 10 seconds. Do this every day. You can do this at night when you're watching TV or playing around on social media, whatever it is that you're doing. This is a great drill. It's easy to do, and beginners can do this all the way up to those elite football players. Okay, so coming in at that number 5 spot, we're gonna focus on the ankle joint. And I really believe that if we can mobilize our ankles when we're playing football, that's going to help protect our knee joint. It's going to help protect our hip joint. So it's really, really important to make sure our ankles are really mobile. So what is that first ankle exercise? That's going to be a dorsiflexion stretch with overpressure. So what does that mean? This is a nice, easy exercise where you can push your knee forward. You can start this off when you're in bare feet. You push your heels down, and as you apply force into your knee, you track your knee forward while your heels stay down. I recommend thinking about pushing your heel down as though it's your thumb and grabbing with your toes to help create more foundational stability. While you're grabbing with that foot, that knee will track forward and you can hold a little bit of overpressure for a longer period of time. Low load, long period. That can lead to nice mobility improvements in the ankle joint. Now, a little drill that you can add is you could put a belt or a band around your joint. And now as you apply force forward and your foot is grabbing, that belt or that band is pulling back, and that can potentially help the talus bone move posteriorly. So when the talus bone moves back, that can create more mobility through that joint. And then if you can contract a little while you're doing this drill, that will help improve your mobility in your ankles. So this is something that's going to help you when you're cutting. This is something that's going to help you get into a deeper stance if you're an offensive or defensive lineman. If my ankle can dorsiflex more effectively, I can play deeper. On top of that, if it's more mobile and I'm a running back or a linebacker and guys are rolling up on my ankles, in theory, it could potentially help prevent ankle sprains or any other issue that you have in that joint. It's not guaranteed, but it's going to help prevent that stuff. So I recommend doing this every day or every other day. Help wake up your ankles so that they're mobile. So when you get on the field, you can hit better positions and your knees can track more effectively. Now that takes us into our fourth exercise, and this is gonna focus on the lats and the T spine. And this is going to be the foam roller down dog. So when we're talking about the foam roller down dog, this is going to help us extend our thoracic spine and rotate our thoracic spine a little bit more effectively. Now, if we can think about it, a lot of football is played here, okay? We're gonna be pressing quite a bit. We're gonna be incline benching quite a bit. We might get serious development in our pecs and inside of our deltoids. We might walk around and we might be a little bit more internally rotated if we're not following a really effective periodized strength program for football. But that's where the lats and the T-spine come into play. If we're utilizing the foam roller down dog, this is a very easy exercise that you can do every single day to help extend that thoracic spine. I recommend doing this 2 to 3 sets for 15 passes and then hold an isometric contraction at the end of those 15 passes for 20 to 30 seconds. This is gonna help you achieve greater position if you're doing snatches, if you're doing behind the neck jerks. It's gonna help you rotate a little bit more effectively if you're turning to catch the ball. This is gonna help you make better reads if you're a linebacker because you're gonna be more mobile in your thoracic spine. So now I can rotate a little bit more effectively with my upper back than having to turn my hips. If I'm more mobile in my upper back, I can keep my hips square. That's something that a lot of football players forget. If our upper back can rotate more effectively through more mobile pathways, I can keep my hips square to my opponents and they will not get a better position. So do this every single day. It's a simple trick, it's a simple movement, and it's going to help you, 1, with recovery, but 2, with positions on the field, and 3, with positions in the weight room. That takes us to our number 3 exercise, and we're going to be focusing on our adductors, and that's going to be the sliding Cossack squats. So a lot of football players, linemen, if we're pulling or if we're stunting on the defensive side, we might get a little bit of groin pain, adductor pain, if we're doing it quite a bit. Same with running backs and linebackers. If we're constantly sliding or shuffling down the line or scraping down the line and we're making good reads, we've got to use our adductors quite a bit. Same if we're talking about wide receivers or D-backs and we have to make fast cuts. A lot of these cuts come back to how healthy and how strong our adductors are. And if they're mobile and they can be lengthened, when they're lengthened, they can recruit quite a bit of motor units so you can be stronger out of that cut. That's where the sliding Cossack squats come into play. If I focus on sliding that leg nice and deep and lengthening my adductors and then squeezing when I come in, Now my hips are gonna be a little bit healthier, I'm gonna be more mobile, and then on top of that, we can add a little bit of a facet here. We can put a plate overhead. Now we put a plate overhead and we superset lats in the T-spine work here, so we're doing foam roller down dogs, and then we're coming back and we're doing overhead sliding Cossack squats. Now our thoracic spine's more opened up, and then we're also triggering those adductors to start to wake up as well when we're doing the sliding work, and we start to pair these things together. On top of that, this is gonna help open our hips tremendously, and if we're doing the right ankle work, now our ankles get more mobile and everything starts to coincide. Everything starts to feed off of one another synergistically, and that's where I recommend sliding Cossack squats 1, 2, maybe 3 times a week, but typically 2 times a week for 7 to 9 reps on each leg, and I would say 2 to 4 sets out of those 2 specific days. Now it's gonna take us to our number 2 exercise here for hips, and that's going to be duck walks. And so this is not only gonna be the number 2 movement for football players in general, it's also going to be the number 2 movement for hips overall. So if we can think about duck walks, this is something I stole directly from NFL analyst and 11-year NFL vet, Brian Baldinger. When I talked to Brian about what made him so good in the NFL, what helped him lengthen his career, he said almost every single day we would do duck walks. We would do duck walks with our body weight. We would do duck walks with a plate. We would do duck walks with a barbell. We would do duck walks with a pad. And what that told me is that that helped improve his ankle mobility. That helped improve his lower back mobility. It helped open up his hips. It helped him get a little bit wider with his stance and play a little bit lower. If we can think about the greats on the offensive line, like Joe Thomas. Joe Thomas is an animal, he's huge, but his hip level is extremely low because his hip mobility was so good. And that's the big concept here. If we can even think about someone like Barry Sanders, when Barry Sanders would be cutting, his hip level would be really low. When his hip level's a little bit lower, he's got a little bit more knee flexion, he's got a little bit more ankle dorsiflexion. That helps him be stable in all 3 of those joints. That's where duck walks comes into play. If you don't have knee pain, I recommend doing this every single day as a warm-up. Okay, it's gonna help with your ankles, it's gonna help with your knees, it's gonna help with your lower back, and if you put a plate overhead, it's also gonna help with your T-spine. This is a simple exercise. I think that every football player in the entire country should be able to pass a test and do this movement to actually be able to play football. If you are too stiff to do something as simple as a duck walk, then you might be more at risk to being injured. So do these on a regular basis so that you're more limber, you're more mobile, and it's going to help you play better football. Now, all these exercises are really difficult, and the problem that we see is periodizing a program with proper strength training that coincides with that mobility work. A lot of strength coaches struggle with this. A lot of football coaches struggle with this. A lot of football coaches like to overdevelop certain areas of their players instead of focusing on the global aspect of strength training. They also struggle to try to piece mobility movements into their strength training. And that's why we put together an entire mobility program for football players that you can pick up by clicking on the link down below. And if you want one of our strength training programs, you can click on our resistance or rebellion-based strength training program to help you this off-season with football. Now, coming in at that number 1 spot, this is gonna be all for ankles. Again, PVC pipe walks. This is something that's gonna help with the way your knee is tracking. It can improve your dorsiflexion in your ankles. It can improve your plantar flexion. It can improve the activity of your toes. And when all these things start to operate at a higher level, now you get more neurological feedback and you're more aware of what's going on. Your proprioception starts to improve. I recommend doing PVC pipe walks for 5 sets of 15 yards. And when you're doing that, do it forward, do it backwards, do it fast, do it slow and controlled, and think about the heel being the thumb, the toes being the fingers. grab that ground. Now you're gonna start to run fast because your toes are gonna start to wake up. The more active our toes are, the more active our feet becomes, the more aware we are, the faster we're going to run. That's science. There's a lot of evidence that the more active our toes are, the faster we can run in 100 meters or in a 40-yard dash, whatever it is that we're doing. I even recommend doing PVC pipe walks with toe walks and with heel walks. If we're doing it with heel walks, we can improve our dorsiflexion. If we're doing it on our toes, we can improve our plantar flexion. Now we're working through that entire range with our ankles. We're doing those PVC pipe walks, which is gonna handle that proprioceptive side, and we will dominate on the gridiron. So I recommend doing this every single day as a warm-up. You can pair that with duck walks, and then all of these exercises can really feed off of one another, and it's gonna help you become a more limber and more mobile football player, and that's gonna get you to dominate on the gridiron. So if you want more help around mobility, you can click on the link down below and you can pick up a copy of your mobility program for football. If you want help with strength training, you can click on the link down below and you can pick up our resistance-based program for offensive and defensive linemen, or our rebellion-based program for skilled position players, so that you can dominate this coming football season. If you want more information about football-based training, click on this card right here. Until next time, guys, peace.